About 7 years ago, 3 of my friends, let's call them John, Brendan, and Charlie, were going to have a sleepover at John's house. We were all between the ages of 14 and 15. John lived with his grandfather. His grandma had passed away a few months before he was born and had lived a full life as a photographer, but she struggled and eventually died from breast cancer, which then took his mother about 8 years later. So, that particular night, his grandfather was out of town for a funeral for an old war buddy, and we had the house to ourselves. We stayed up late playing Super Smash Bros. Melee, and we all crashed at about 2 a.m. on the floor in the living room. Later that night, I woke up freezing cold, which was odd because it had been a fairly warm day, and I checked the time. 4:30. I look around and see a red, blinking light on the coffee table. I make a mental note about that seeming out of place, but I was too cold, not to mention tired to get up, so I rolled over and went back to sleep. The next morning, I wake up to John shaking me violently. I open my eyes, and I can tell by his face that something is wrong. I try to ask him what's going on, but he just points at the coffee table. On the table was his grandma's last Kodak camera. He tells me that it hasn't been out of his grandma's drawer since she's been dead. He's only ever looked in there. We try to blow it off. Maybe his grandpa was getting nostalgic because of his war buddy's death, reminding him of his wife's death, and took it out to remember or something. Brendan and Charlie and I were pretty satisfied with that, though John still had some doubts. A week goes by, and we had all pretty much forgot about that strange morning, except for John, who had been stressing out about it ever since. He decides to go get the camera's pictures developed. He calls us the next day. I can hear his voice trembling as he begs us to hurry over. When we get over there, he throws down the bundle of pictures in front of us. We flip through them, and most of what looks like some last scenic trip his grandmother took before she died. When we get to the last 3 pictures, I froze. Brendan and Charlie both gasped. The pictures were of us. All 4 of us captured in each picture, sleeping on the floor in front of the television. No one else was home that night. The camera had no self-timer. I still haven't been able to explain it and get freaked out when I think back on it. It was probably past midnight and everyone was sleeping. It was my very first sleepover, my first time away from home. I wasn't used to sharing a room with others, much less with 5 other kids. Bertha was snoring loudly and Maggie's nose was whistling. It was just impossible to sleep. I tried counting sheep, but that didn't help. I decided to get my phone out and play some games until I got tired. I didn't want to wake anyone with the light from my phone's display, so I got up to shut myself up in Maggie's closet. I was still playing when I heard the bedroom door open. I quickly locked my phone and listened hard. It was probably Maggie's mom. I hoped that she wouldn't notice that I was missing. It would be hard to explain why I was in the closet. I heard heavy breathing that really didn't sound like Maggie's mom or dad. I listened for what felt like 10 minutes, but it was probably just several seconds. I couldn't see anything except some dim light from under the closet door. Someone was just standing there in the room, breathing heavily. Something felt wrong. Something felt off. I was scared, so I stayed still and willed my heart to beat quieter. I heard someone yell. Then the screams started. I heard loud thumping, thuds, banging. I heard my friend screaming and screaming. I jammed my hand into my mouth as tears streamed down my face. I knew that something terrible was happening in that room. The sounds of skin and fabric tearing mingled with the smell of blood, and blood-curdling screams would haunt me for the next 15 years. The fear, my fear, and theirs, paralyzed me. I sat there, trembling and in shock until the sounds died away. I heard the footsteps leaving the room, and I sat there for what felt like hours, waiting for the person to come back and find me. When the sound of silence became deafening, I picked up my phone and texted my mom. My text only had one word: help. I did not dare to make any calls or indeed any sound at all. Then I put my phone to silent mode, turned off the vibration, and waited. No one came. No text came. I waited still, too afraid to move. The hours passed as my legs turned numb. I was already out of my mind when I finally heard my mom's voice, followed by her screams. It was then that I had passed out. For the next 2 years after that nightmarish sleepover at Maggie's house, I shared my parents' bedroom. I dreamt of blood and gore every night. It was hell. We moved to a different city a month after that incident. I dropped out of school very quickly, and my parents had me homeschooled. I entered college at 19, got my degree at 22, and finally gained employment in a software company. I never moved out of my parents' house. I just didn't feel safe. They never caught the person who butchered the 4 9-year-old girls. Maggie's parents were reported missing and were never seen again. Now, 15 years of therapy later, I still can't go into dark places. My house is perpetually lit. I sleep with all the lights on. Yesterday, I received a letter that came with my office mail. It was a large, expensive-looking white envelope with gold borders. Inside were 3 pictures. The first one was the carnage that was in the bedroom all those years ago when I hid in the closet. I threw up when I realized what I was looking at. The next one was the front of a cabin surrounded by lots of trees. The third, my God, she's still alive, if that is called living, that is. I threw up again and again until my vomit turned green. The vile sight of her twisted limbs are still fresh in my mind. I've notified the police. Now I can only wait until the nightmare revisits me. He will come for me. I know it. I'm sitting here, holding my gun, and waiting for him to come. I will continue to wait until the day I die. He will never take me alive. Update. I did not expect to have an update to this story. I expected to just go into hiding and lie and wait for my pursuer. But the events have taken a strange turn, and I need your help to understand why this is happening. After a second set of photos showed up at my office, I quit my job with no notice and moved. Yes, I'm that paranoid. My parents, too, quit their jobs and moved with me. They're very disturbed that this has surfaced, and we're currently surviving on our savings until we can figure out the safest move to make. The police were given all the photos, and they know how to contact me. This sicko is contacting me for a reason which I do not know yet. Why now? Why send me photos? I looked at one before I threw them back into the envelope they came with and called the police. The photo I looked at was of her, posed like a puppet. She was strung from the rafters with an arm bent backwards in an impossible angle. Her eyes, or should I say, eye, as only one was actually there, was rolled back. She had no eyelids. The right socket was empty where an eye should have been. The only reason I could recognize her was because Maggie has a small mole at the center of her forehead. We used to play in Maggie's house after school. We were invited over every day, and our parents were more than happy to send us there. Maggie's mother would always go through our homework with us, and then it was snack time, and then playtime. Playtime was almost always spent either watching cartoons or playing make-believe. We watched a lot of Sailor Moon cartoons. I was always so envious of Maggie's mole. It was at the center of her forehead, just where Sailor Moon wears a red ruby. When we played make-believe, Maggie was always Sailor Moon. She had long blonde hair, and with the ruby mole, she was naturally the main character. I wanted to be her, but it was impossible. My mother wouldn't let me dye my hair black, and everyone agreed that I was to be Mars. I suppose that's better than being Janice. She had a short bob and was always made to play a tuxedo mask, the male character in the cartoon. Anyway, we would wear our school uniforms, hum the song, and change into our characters. It sounds so stupid now, changing our clothes in the backyard and turning into sailor characters, but we had a lot of fun. Why am I telling you about the make-believe sessions of Sailor Moon? Because that was what she was wearing in the photo. She was wearing an adult-sized Sailor Moon costume, while all strung up like a broken doll. She was obviously wearing a cheap wig that was made to look like Sailor Moon, and there was even a wand in her right hand. I don't know why this person has done this horrible thing to Maggie, or why they chose Sailor Moon, or why they're sending me these photos. All I know is that Bertha, Lisa, Terry, and Janice died in the bedroom that day where I was supposed to have also been killed. I had always believed that Maggie and her parents were dead and buried somewhere in the wilderness. It makes me sick to know that she's still alive, kept barely alive in such a state for this many years. And now, this person is after me. And all I can think of is why.